Welcome to Align Your Practice, an exploration of the seamless relationship between the business of chiropractic and the future of natural health care. Join us as we engage with an array of talent, from seasoned experts to passionate new entrepreneurs. Now, here's your host, Dr. Joe Esposito.
Hi, and welcome to the Align Your Practice podcast. This is Dr. Joe Esposito, and I'm here with my counterpart, Chief Operating Officer of Align Life, Eric Rahn. Eric, how are you?
I'm doing great. Good day.
Yeah, last time I had you on, I think you were sick or something. You're like, I got to get back on top. So now we're ready. You are healthy and inspired.
My voice is fully intact. Yeah, good to go.
So today, we're going to talk about operations, but guys, if you're on this call right now, we want to really quantify and allow you to self-select where you're at. Some of you on the call may be at a state of unconscious incompetence, meaning that you're blissfully going about your day in your practice. You're saving lives, you're helping people, but you don't even know what you don't know. You don't know what to measure. You don't know where the gap is, but you're having fun, changing lives, but deep down, you know you haven't reached your potential. You know you haven't reached your economic prosperity that you deserve, you and your family deserve. You know there's something there, but as of right now, you don't even know what you don't know. The second group of people that may be on this call is those that have conscious incompetence. You know there's a gap. You know you should be measuring, or you're measuring and you don't know what behaviors you need to input in order to make the change to reach the next level. So there's a frustration. There's a quiet, pain or dysfunction internally that you're wanting to solve. And then there's the third level. We have conscious competence, where you're doing well. You're leveraging systems. You're scaling, but you want to get to the next level. You want to go from 1 to 3 clinics. You've dialed in your system, but you don't have the infrastructure to actually scale what you know you're able to scale. Eric, how do you feel about those 3 buckets? Does that make sense from what you and I spoke to earlier?
Yeah, it really does. Because I think the idea of what does it look like to get to that last bucket, to where you're consciously competent, but want to get to that next level, because that's not the end, right? Conscious competence isn't the end. It's the beginning of something great, really, is what it is. And so when I think about what do I do to get there and what does that even mean, it's really about mastering your operations and understanding how do I dial in what I have and make it even better? And that's really where I think we're going to kind of get at that today, is just really talking about the abilities that can come inside of a system like Align Life that helps you to master everything, to see scale and to see massive growth.
Yeah, I think I think the first 2, when you're unconscious incompetent, blissfully going about your day, or conscious incompetence that you're struggling and need service, both of those, or even the third, where you're consciously competent, you're using systems. All 3, you may still just be owning your job. You're owning your job unsuccessful, you're owning your job frustrated, or you're owning your job and you're very successful at systems. I'm sorry. What you brought up a good point, that those 3 stages still just opens the door for the next, which is where you're owning a business, not just a job. So I like the way you put that, because you open that door. Now it's like, hey, I own a business now. I'm not chained of my job detail. Without me there, the business doesn't run. So that's the next 10 stages, right, Eric? I mean, that was interesting.
Yeah, which is the future talks about mastering leadership, right? And really blowing it up.
I like that. So let's break it down. Do you want to go through each segment? But I want to serve with some, my goal here, Eric, is at the end of this session that the listeners kind of quantify the next step, like wherever they are, what's the next step? And I think Align Life does a great job by helping to segment groups of doctors in different segments of their consciousness, of their business growth, of their current status of knowledge and awareness, and helping tickle them a little of saying, hey, look at this awareness here. And here's a behavior that could get you over here, right? So we got to move that along the journey.
Yeah, I mean, let's just start with the unconscious incompetence. I think it's I laugh because if you're hearing those words right now, you might automatically be putting yourself in that bucket that says, I'm not there, but you might be there. There might be some symptoms that are pointing to that. Because if you're just kind of showing up for work day to day in your practice and you know you're coming in and you've kind of got this process that you do every day, and you're just coming in, you're serving your patients, and you're going home at the end of the day. Somebody's doing your books, somebody's you got somebody that's checking your patients in, you got somebody that's checking your patients out. You kind of have the parts and pieces to it, but you're not real sure, are these things working? Are they maximized? Am I doing all of the things that I need to do to be the best that I can be?
Yeah, so let's give some insights. If you feel you're unconscious incompetence, mean you don't know what you don't know, like you don't know the gap. So let's just give you some data. If you can just start by saying every month statting how many people walked in your door, how many people accepted care, what the average income you make per visit in your office, and what your patient visit average, which is also in the regular world, outside the chiropractic world, it's called lifetime value or LTV. Measure those. And the last one would be, let's say, revenue per employee. Take your total revenue divided by the number of staff you have. Get those 5 points and measure them every month over the next 3 months and see if they're moving in the right direction. Now, revenue per employee is not going to change unless you're significantly raising income or you're adding more staff. So that's slower to move. But the other ones, they start to move on a month by month basis. So let's say if you were to measure those, if you're in the first bucket, unconscious incompetence, and see if things are moving up, down, or stagnated. And that'll give you real strong awareness as how to climb out of being unconscious incompetence. It's not fun, the next step, conscious incompetence. It means you know that you don't know. So now you got to figure out the behavior. But that's a good way to start if you're in the first bucket. Would you agree, Eric?
Yeah, I would say if you're in that first bucket and you're hearing this podcast and you're starting to think through, do I know the answers to these questions? That's probably, first of all, it's probably a symptom that you do have the unconscious incompetence, and you're trying to figure out where to start. And so what's really cool about that, though, is like the moment that you make that connection, you almost automatically slip into the conscious incompetence now, because now you just had an awareness that I don't know the answers to these questions, and I would say in my time with Align Life, I've been here for about 9 months now, and a lot of the people that I talk to from outside of our system that are running independent practices, a lot of them live in this space, because when you start to have a business conversation with them, a lot of them don't know the answers to those questions. Just trying to understand where they're at with their current situation. Most can tell me like they're about what they're doing collections wise per month. But when you start to talk into breaking that down and how are you getting those dollars and what is the value of your patients and all of those different aspects, how many you've seen a day, it's kind of hit and miss, I think, on a lot of people. So I think getting to that next bucket and understanding what you do to measure, the good news is that, that's where we're at. That's the purpose of this talk, is to kind of break through that unconsciousness that you might be feeling right now. Don't feel bad about that. Like it's like we all have it to some degree in some realm or another. But the next breakthrough is saying, okay, now I'm conscious of this. What do I do? And I think that that's where the understanding where your gaps are at is what's really important. Now you start to focus on, okay, if it's true that there's potentially gaps that exist, what are those gaps and how do I get there is probably the question that we got to answer next.
So let's go to the next step. So if you now know the data, you see stagnation, the second step in Align Life, once we teach you how to measure, the next step is what behaviors are tied to what numbers. So if one stagnates, we could tell you there's 5 behaviors that we find that are the biggest levers to pull to move that number. And bigger than that, when we do our trainings, the idea is what thoughts are associated to support the behaviors to get the outcome. So everything starts with thoughts or beingness, and then doingness, which is the behavior or the action, and then having is the outcome, which is kind of dead weight. It's the end of consciousness. It's the product. Once you have the product, it's over. There's no real growth. There's no real power in the having. It's always in the being. And I don't want to get too much confusion here, but at this stage of conscious incompetence, where you feel that you know you know what you need to do, you got to move certain numbers because you're measuring them. The other component is breaking apart leading and lagging stats. What I was saying is the having in the be do have matrix. Having is the lagging stat, or the end, which is money, like collections. The leading stats is the being stats, or the leading are behaviors. Be, do, have. It's your being or your doing is the leading stats. I hope I didn't confuse everyone on that. I think you're connecting with me because we talk about this stuff.
Right.
So I hope that I didn't lose everyone on that. Maybe you can help me kind of dance through this, Eric, what I'm trying to correlate. What are your thoughts on that
Yeah,
dialogue?
for sure. So I think when you just think about the journey when somebody walks into your practice, there's sort of that very first thing it actually starts before they walk into your practice, right? Like, how did you get that patient there to begin with? It's really the very first thing that you're trying to figure out. It's, I got them there through some form of marketing. It might have been, I actually paid cash to get this marketing and get them in the door. It might have been a referral from another patient. It might have been a referral from one of your staff members that got somebody in there. But that's really where the journey begins, is that they found out about your practice somehow, some way. And if that's a gap, that could be a gap. Like, how do I get the people to my door to begin with? We can dial that in and say, here are all of the different tools that are in the toolbox that can get that person into the door. Once they get in the door, now it's about that experience that they're going to have. Their first interactions they're having with your check-in person. That person's going to engage that patient in a certain way. Then it's going to get to the doc. The doc's going to have their experience with them, that initial visit and running them through all those different things. And they're going to have a checkout experience. And all of those experiences within the operational matrix, if you will, has a set of behaviors that should give you some expected outcome. So if they came in the door and they had a really bad experience right out of the gate, you're trying to figure out how to win that patient back because they had a bad experience the moment they walked in the door. You don't want that. You want to make sure that check-in person is engaging them in a certain way, and they're doing it in the same way. It's somewhat repetitive with their natural personality, but that's such an operational key, is the consistencies of what you're doing in your day-to-day operations. Is about consistency over and over again, the repetitiveness of it, but using the innate personalities of the human that's actually engaging with those patients in between each interaction. But I think that it really just comes down to assessing each step along the way and asking about each piece of that journey with your patients, so they can give you honest feedback on whether or not you think you might be hitting or not hitting it. Because again, you can almost backfall into an unconscious incompetence when you assume everything is just okay. But you have to be measuring this stuff. You have to be checking it. The quality control piece of operations is all about the leading and lagging thing that Joe was talking about. The quality control piece is saying, we believe these behaviors, the leading, are going to give us this result, the lagging. The only way to know whether or not it's truly working is, am I getting the result? If I'm not getting the result that I think I'm going to get, now I have to start back at the leading indicators and say, where are the gaps? Where is it falling down? And rework and recycle some of those leading indicators and key performance indicators that are going to get people the result that you're looking for.
You said consistency, and I love the phrase in entrepreneurship, consistency is the new intensity. So that's one thing to break down. The other thing is, the number one attribute of entrepreneurship is creativity. So taking those two things, consistency and creativity, when you're looking at data, the first thing you want to do is find out what behaviors can I implement that can create consistent movement up or maintaining a number. Because in business, it's just like being a clinician. We want to limit variables so we can assess an outcome. If I'm trying to move a number like A1C and blood sugar, well, I'm going to kind of control the diet. I want to control the stress. I want to control the sleep. I want to control the nutrient intake to change the outcome. And you and I always talk about value-based healthcare. You coming from the medical world, that's the shift in healthcare, it's the same thing when I'm looking at a clinical case is I am looking at limiting variables. Well, let's carry that discussion into the business world. And guess what we're doing here is we're looking at limiting variables. So Eric said consistency. Not only do you need to know the behaviors, but then you got to have the self leadership and the team leadership to maintain, like you said. Another thing is auditing to maintain the consistency of the behaviors, right? It's not knowing the behaviors, it's training to the behaviors so you can maintain the right behaviors. Then if you want to move to the next level, having the creativity to know how to make it better to scale again. I mean, that's a lot there loaded into that. But that's some of the beauty of Align Life is we look at not just training in Align Life, but we look at development. And as a sports guy, Eric was almost went pro in baseball as a catcher. As a catcher, when you were in Little League, Eric, you trained throwing the ball, catching the ball, hitting the ball. The same thing you did when you were a semi-pro, catching the ball, throwing the ball, hitting the ball. It's the same thing, but they developed you differently from Little League through college. Development's different than training, right? And in Align Life, what we do is we see where you're at and kind of carry you through what I'm talking about is knowing, let's get creative, let's get to the next level.
Yeah, that's, and I think that's where the beauty of a system comes into play so well, because whether it's training where you're with multiple people and we're training you in groups and you get to really beat up the scripting and dial that in, or it's the individual coaching, the one-on-one, like, which you can be so much more prescriptive with that particular person and develop them based on where they're at. So when we're coming into a conversation with somebody, all of us, whether it's me, you, the training team, whoever it is, when we're having a conversation, we're always going back and kind of just looking at the key performance indicators. We've got the whole list of them. We're looking at that. We're saying, we see what their collections are, and we see where their, whatever their marketing metrics are, and we're looking at the value of the patients, and we're looking at all these different things. We're going into a conversation. We have a consciousness based on what we read in front of us, and that's informing us on where the development gap might be of whoever that person is. And so what we want to be able to teach our business owners is, this is what we see of your particular center. And then that performance gap that we see at the level of ownership then trickles back down into the staff. And so which part of the staff needs a little extra development, needs a little bit extra help, or needs to be retrained on something, or doesn't know. Like we don't know until we start to really dig in. But if it wasn't for the metrics that are being measured, we wouldn't know how to have that conversation, right? Like you go into a conversation, it's kind of like going back to what I was saying earlier, having conversations with chiropractors that are independent business owners now. I'm going into those conversations, I don't have all of the data that informs me on whether or not they're running a successful practice. I'm just going into it as a conversation piece, asking some of those leading questions to get their lagging answers to find out whether or not they're successful by what we would deem to be successful. And so but when you're inside the system, now you've got more eyes that are there to help you, and they're helping you to say, we are doing the work that's constantly figuring out which of these particular things that we're looking at on a daily basis seem to make the most impact, so that you can get to the point where you have a conscious competence to know, okay, if I dial all these things in, that opens up a new door and a new opportunity to do whatever that next thing is.
Yeah, no, I'm on the same page exactly with what you're saying. And the third one is when you are dialed in and you have systems and you want to scale. Scale is when you're not working harder, you're leveraging your scar tissue, your knowledge, your influence, your reputation, your 20 years of hard work, and you want to now start moving the needle fast to gain more market share, gain more value, gain more exit opportunity, all the different steps that our profession seems to stagnate towards the last component of practice, the last 10 years, where you spend good 15 years in, and now it's time to move, and you feel kind of content, complacent, and you don't even know there's another level. So the beauty of Align Life at the development of a clinic or a doctor at that level of learning how to scale. When I had my 6 clinics, I didn't have the opportunity to look at group marketing. I didn't have economies of scale, even at 6 clinics. I didn't understand, an operation level to what we see now in Align Life. That's refined every 90 days, over 400 pages by every single job detail, training per job detail. I just trained everyone together, and there was no maturity to it. I kind of stagnated because I didn't have the infrastructure. So the beauty of a system like Align Life is being able to start segmenting and seeing how we can help each individual staff gain leadership to help you reproduce and scale what you have. And I think that's, you and I talk about this a lot, but leadership is that next stage. I got my systems, I'm competent, but you haven't got scale yet. You haven't leveraged what you have. You still own your job. And scaling is when you build a business. And Align Life can provide tools like a call center, leverage resources, leverage team members. And I'll give you 2 examples, and I want you to put your 2 cents around it. This weekend at the Align Life training in Atlanta, one of the doctors was talking about maturing their knowledge of their profit loss, how to better understand it now that they've matured. And you talked about a coursework that you were putting together, exactly what they were saying they wanted. So I'm like, wow, what a win. And then another call today, $6 million in revenue on a 6 clinic chain, lost one of their key docs, doesn't know how to create the golden handcuffs, the incentives, the bonus, the infrastructure to help the team mature and stay together as they navigate through the next level of scale. They reached out to Align Life saying, what steps can I take? So you see so much meat there, Eric. No matter where you are in the journey on scale, 1 million, 10 million, there's always another level of refinement that you can take.
There really is. And I think, it reminds me of what we kind of talked about in the very first podcast we did a few months ago, and the concept of mastering your financials, because there's the element of mastering operations, because that's the thing that you have to do right out of the gate. You have to master your operations in order to build that momentum and that success. But then you start to master your financials in a way that says, what does it look like to be a profit first mentality, where I'm zeroing in on the cash that I need to be putting away, so that I can either, for a couple of reasons, like scaling another office, or even just keeping money aside for capital. Like, I think one of the biggest mistakes that you see with individual business owners is like they'll get 5 to 10 years into their business and forget that all of the stuff they have is going to break, get old, need to be refreshed, whatever the case is. And now I need cash, and I don't have any cash because I wasn't thinking through these things long term enough. And I think that we're really maturing that mindset around our team to make sure that they're thinking through all of that. In fact, it's accounted for even in our FDD and all these other things that we are trying to forward think for people to say, you got to be thinking about this. Like, those Cairo tables aren't going to look like that for 10 years. Like, they're going to break down, or your paint's going to get old, or your floors are going to wear out, or whatever the case might be. You're going to need cash for that, just that alone. But more importantly, what you don't want to be in is in a position to where I'm 20 years into this and I've not really thought about how I'm going to get out of this. And so we want to make sure that people are positionally in a good spot. Getting out doesn't mean getting out and necessarily retiring at the beach, right? Like, that's ideal situation. That's what we all kind of look for. But getting out meaning, how do I maximize everything that is the value of this center that I'm in right now? I got to get the most out of this. And too many people in the independent business world today are they're white knuckling their way through and burning out because they're not planning well. And so I think that's where we really have an opportunity to help a lot of people. Is like, okay, I'm in this position, I'm successful now, but that value that I have now may not be the same value that I'm going to have how many ever years from now. Like, you're going to maximize that right now. And how do we help you get there, and we can help you make that plan.
Yeah, that's a big conversation. I think we can set this up for another podcast episode where we're really talking about exit value. And this is a very mature conversation. This is a very, very important conversation. And it's not a conversation that you're going to want to have when you're burnt out and ready to leave your practice tomorrow. It's a very dangerous conversation to begin this when you want it. So it's like, I always equate it to something like putting the time and energy. And I always say, like, who wants to put the time and energy to buy a new roof for their house? That's the worst thing you want to buy. You want to buy a pool, you want to buy a car. I don't want to buy a roof. No one sees it. It's not fun. But if you wait until the roof fully collapses and water collapses in your kitchen, it's a little too late. I don't know if that's a good scenario for this, but maybe it is. When you're looking at exit, it's not something you want to talk about right now because I'm in the midst of practice. But if you do it right, just like you take care of your house the right way, you're going to set up a long-term plan that's very fruitful, lower stress, better outcome. So I think it's worth the time, Eric, that as we finish this conversation, we open the door to a conversation of how to maximize that value for you and your family. So whether, and you made a good point, and I don't want to belabor this talk too much because there'll be another podcast, but ending ownership does not mean ending your career. And that's a hard one to wrap your head around. You could sell a business and still adjust. You could sell a business and still manage it. It's just sell at the prime. It's like Michael Jordan didn't wait till he couldn't dunk before he retired. He went out on top. In business, you want to go out on top, not when you're starting to crash and you're getting tired. You want to maximize value. So what do you think? I think that's worthy of a full discussion.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's such a big topic that, frankly, Align Life's getting in on the early end of, and I think that's a huge deal, and it puts us in a really good position to help people through that conversation. But I think going back to that conscious competence piece, I think what could happen a lot of times is people can get in this position now where they might be listening to this talk and just assume they have it all figured out. Like, I don't need any of this. I've got good systems. Everything I have is working, and that's great. I mean, and that very well could be the case. I'm not saying that there's not lots of people out there that are running really successful businesses, but I think it's always worth at least examining and saying, you know what, maybe I'm not as dialed in as I thought I was. It's probably at least worth another conversation because it's, we don't know what we don't know. I think it's kind of like everything in life. Like, we don't know if what's on the other side of that hill is better than what's on this side of the hill unless we go to that side of the hill and talk to somebody about it, right? It's like,
Yeah.
You can hear about it, but once you start having that conversation, I've talked to plenty of successful chiropractors that are, they see the value in the system, and then they're struggling with, should I pull this trigger? Should I not pull this trigger? Am I too far down the line to make this kind of a decision? Like, I feel like that's for somebody that's brand new out of school. I mean, when you look at our mix of guys and girls that we have inside of our system, it's all over the board as far as like their entry into the system versus their career path. We have people that did come in fairly late career that are now a part of this system. We do have the brand new students that came into Align Life and bought a franchise right away. So I just don't want anybody to think that there's because I'm at this particular stage of my career, I'm conscious of everything that I have going on, I don't have any need for this. Yeah, you might be surprised.
Yeah, it's a good conversation. It's so let's ending here. If you listen to the podcast, number one, if you feel you have the unconscious incompetence, please reach out. You can go to support@alignlife.com and state that you'd like to get help in measuring your data to understand where there's gaps. If you have conscious incompetence, meaning there's gaps, you got to learn the behaviors, you can also reach out, support@alignlife.com, and we can have one of our coaches, our business development experts, kind of see what your stats are now and even give some complimentary advice to give you a couple tools and what you can do to level up in your business. And then if you're ready to scale, you're ready to take your existing successful business and reproduce it 2, 3, 4, 5 times, but want a system, you want a team of people that can help train and coach, not just you who knows the business, but other doctors, other staff members to help you leverage your experience. That is definitely the perfect window that we'd like to help and have a conversation with. So that, again, support@alignlife.com.
Yeah,
so
I kind of want to back up.
Yeah,
real quick, just kind of going back to each one of those categories again, and just being mindful of it's the operations that you're running day to day that are going to dictate the success of your business. I mean, it just
true.
is. No matter what, no matter how, like, depending on how far left brain or how far right brained you are. If you're more right brain, you like that word operations, right? Like if you're more left brain, you don't really like that word so much. So, but I think that no matter what, you can't get around it. The reality is that running effective and efficient operations on a day-to-day basis is what's going to lead to the future success of your business and ultimately you in the business world, based on whether or not you're dialed in on all of the different ways you're running your operations.
100%. Yeah. No, that's a great way to close up. Is it's all about those behaviors of those systems, no matter where you are on it. Not only you learning it, but how do you leverage it and teach other people the same thing without you having to do all the work? That's that end stage that I was introducing. So awesome. So join us next time we talk about exit value and on building practice equity, practice value. I think that'll be also one of the great discussions Eric and I will bring to the table. Thanks, Eric, for your time and your expertise.
Awesome. Thanks, Al.
This episode was brought to you by Align Life Chiropractic and Natural Health Centers. If you're interested in creating your dream practice or want to know more about Align Life, go to alignlifepodcast.com.